What's up and what's happening, TPE Fam? We're back with another episode of the Pivot Experience podcast, where our goal is to help leaders pivot into their next. On today's episode, we have a very special session for you all. We had the opportunity to have Chick-fil-A operator Kyle Ashby join us for our last May Lead Better, where he has the opportunity to talk about his journey in becoming a Chick-fil-A operator, some of the challenges and some of the things that he learned during that process. Please tune into this episode and get ready to take some really good notes, because Kyle shares some great nuggets of wisdom to take along with you in your journey, whether that's if you're becoming a Chick-fil-A operator or just being a better leader in general. There's a lot of things that were said during this session. We hope that you guys pick up on something and it will help you become a better leader. Let's tune in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. For those who are going to be coming in late, we'll get them admitted in. For those of you who are here, I want to be as respectful of your time as possible. Thank you guys so much for joining this month's Lead Better. Lead Better is TPE's free virtual sessions that we host every month to let people get a glimpse of what leadership development looks like and what we do from a leadership coaching and development standpoint. This Lead Better is a very special Lead Better. We have a Chick-fil-A operator on the line today. But before we get into the formal introduction of him, I want to let you guys know that this meeting is recorded. And so we record for additional training purposes for us, and we also use the recording for promotional material. And if you guys can do me a favor, look at the chat function and then put where you're from in the chat. We want to know where you guys are connecting with us from. So if you don't mind using the chat function to put where you are from there. Also, any questions that you have during the course of this conversation, please use that chat function, and we'll do our very best for sure at the end to try to address them. But we also will try to address them if we feel that they are timely during the course of our conversation. And so I've got a young man that I've had the pleasure of knowing maybe close to a year now, not quite a year, but we're getting there. He is I want to say he's a Texas native, and he is a part of the Chick-fil-A family. He is an operator that is near our town here in the metropolis, the booming metropolis of Orange, Texas.
In the boom town.
I am talking about Chick-fil-A operator Kyle Ashby. He has taken some time out to share his story with us and trying to help people bridge the gap between where they are currently and where they're trying to get to in their career. A lot of you guys who are participating in this, either you want to have a long-term career with Chick-fil-A or just want to become a better leader in general. So I think this conversation that we're going to have today is going to help with either of those lanes, depending on what you want to do. So Kyle, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
I understand that you're out of town, so the dedication to helping people is huge here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't miss this for the world.
Okay, appreciate it, man. So I just want to kind of just kick this conversation off is, how has it been being an operator in Orange, Texas? Like, how is Orange, Texas treating you?
Man, it has been a blessing. So first off, I want to start with something that I don't think a lot of people know. I was actually born in Beaumont. So shout out to my Chick-fil-A Beaumont people. Didn't live here for super long originally, but I'm glad to be back. Orange, Texas is treating me great. If Friday Night Lights was like a town, I definitely think that would be Orange, Texas. I've been so grateful. I mean, like, I can sit here all day and talk about the business has been great, but I think that's the smallest thing that I would even speak of. It's just the people's great. There's a very involved mayor, he's become my friend. Great teachers and just people who work for the city come to the restaurant all the time. So it's been great just to be accepted into the town. I mean, like you said, I've only been the operator there for 7 months. I've been in the community about 9 months. And so for them to open their arms wide open to some knucklehead that moved from Austin to come run this chicken shack has been nothing short of a blessing for me and my family.
Awesome. I'm glad. The mayor there is a pretty cool guy. I've had the opportunities of meeting him. And
yeah, Larry's great.
Yeah, Larry Spears. We have a good rapport, and so I'm glad that you said Friday Night Lights before you came along. Well, before that restaurant came along, we did a lot of catering in that area, and so I know LCM and all those guys, all
Yeah,
those schools are very competitive. So I think you hit the nail on the head on that. And so I
of
think
course.
I think we have something of note in the chat that we can interrupt our already interrupting our questions. And again,
Come
for
on.
those of you who are out there, please put those questions in the chat. We'll love to hear them. There's someone asking, what is your why? Why did you want to become a Chick-fil-A operator?
Yeah, so it comes down to me for two things. So influence and income. Very like briefly on both of those. Grew up in a very loving household. My parents are awesome. And like many of us who live on the Texas coast, we're very familiar with chemical plant life, refinery life, oil and gas. That's all I knew. So my dad, family, cousins, everybody I knew worked in it. And I got to see my whole family. When times are good, it's really good. And when times are really bad, it's bad. And so I got to see my dad laid off 8 times from different companies for different reasons, mainly to do with just the price of the barrel of oil. And so for me, I knew I wanted to have my own control my family's destiny when it came to financial stability. And wanted to pursue entrepreneurship and owning my own business. Now, at the time, I did not know that was going to be a Chick-fil-A. And then going back, and I'm sure we'll get like further into my story, but there was a small time in college, played football at the University of Texas, and I received a scholarship. So in college terms, I reached financial freedom, if you will, if you can call that, for being a college student, right? I had all my bills paid, my tuition was paid, and my rent was covered. That's financial freedom as a college student. And I realized, like, hey, there's got to be more to this. Like, this is cool. My bills are taken care of, but like, my purpose, if God's put breath in my lungs this morning and I'm going to be here for another 80 years, I got to wake up and do something that's more purposeful, more impactful, like than just like sit here and collect this check. Right. So that I learned that very on. I'm very thankful. I learned that lesson very on in college. And how I did that in college was by mentoring other athletes. I'm a very mediocre athlete myself, but I was a very good coach, and I could coach a young fellow and teammate of mine to be able to run down on special teams or defense and be able to have an impact on the team. So for me, the influence is the first thing. That's how I grew. The income was the first piece, in my why. And then that influence piece is what I really learned in college, that like kept me showing up, kept me engaged, kept me just really like something I was really passionate about. So those are the two things for my why.
Okay, income and influence. And I guess a lot of times people are afraid to be that outright about their why. And I like the fact that you were upfront about it. A lot of people wouldn't put income in their why. Most people don't lead with that as an aspiration, but it's the honest truth.
I mean, yeah, if you want to go, I am so passionate about nonprofit space. My wife does a lot of pro bono counseling work. We're very faithful in giving to our church and different things, and there's a place in that for everybody, and I think that's fantastic work. But at the end of the day, we are not a nonprofit; we are a business. And True Cathy said that himself. So for me, it's like, hey, like I'm here to run a great business. I'm here to love on people, and a lot of times my generosity, both inside the restaurant, outside the restaurant, is predicated on our financial stability. So like first and foremost, I got to show up every day and run a great business. And then my generosity, both personally and professionally, is going to stem from that financial success.
Okay, so someone our guest here, Pierre, he wanted to add on to maybe expanding on the influence piece of your why. Like, what type of influence are you pursuing? And I think that's somewhere in our questioning. I mean, we can definitely touch on it
Yeah,
now and then get back to it in a little bit more detail as we continue the conversation. But go
absolutely.
ahead, though.
So for me, my mantra at Orange, Texas. So if I refer to Orange, I'm referring to my restaurant, Orange FSU, right there at I-10 and US 87. So if you're going to Rosemary Beach or Lake Charles Casino, stop by and see me. But our mantra there is we want to be Orange's best stepping stone, or Orange County's best stepping stone. And so what does that mean? We're surrounded by chemical plants. We're surrounded by a decent amount of economic growth, especially for a town of 20,000 people. I do not expect people to work for me for 30, 40 years. If they want to, amazing. I'll probably have 3 or 4 people who do work for me for 5-10 year period. And if they want to do that, that's great. And it's my job as a business owner to create an environment which they can thrive and support their family to do so. But for, I have 86 employees. So if I have 3 stay with me long term, the other 85 people, and we're going to eventually grow and scale our business to where we have 100 to 120 employees. The other 100 employees that I have, they're going to go be great process operators of the plant. They're going to go be nurses, teachers, coaches, everything in between. The list is very long. So for me, I want to give and equip each one of my leaders, team members, whatever it may be, with the skills to say that Chick-fil-A Orange left an impact on them, and they became a better person and gained the skills to be able to thrive in whatever avenue later on that their heart and mind was set on.
No, I love that, and I think that it's crazy for me to hear you say that, because my operator, I remember when I first started working for Robert here in Beaumont when I was 14, and one of the things he said that this job should be the last job until you get to your career job. So I think that, even 20 years later, hearing an operator echo that same sentiment, I think speaks to what the brand is and kind of what the brand wants their operators to represent. I love that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, your initial experience as an operator. You did something, and I think some of the leaders online probably have experienced this in some effect, maybe not to the same effect as you, but you took over an existing operation, operation that already had leaders, already had staff, already had good habits, already had bad habits. Talk through that transition from LDP to taking over an existing operation, and what opportunities and challenges did you have in those first months?
Yeah. So for me, this is an easier question because I got exactly what I wanted. Like I said, I was born in Beaumont, but from the area. I lived in Lake Jackson, so about an hour and a half away. But I wanted a restaurant, in the greater Houston area, and a backfill freestander at that. Like, I got basically what my dream is. So if I say anything that doesn't align with that, please stop this phone call right now. So one, just very thankful just to have that opportunity. Because I always joked when I was going through the operator interview process that I would have taken a hot dog stand with a Chick-fil-A logo on the side of it. Like, just give me an opportunity and I'll take the ball and run with it. But yeah, no, it's been absolutely fantastic. I am very thankful that the brand of Chick-fil-A, one of the great things about becoming an operator or in just working with Chick-fil-A as a brand, whether you're a general manager of a restaurant, whether you're an operator, whether you work on staff, which I had the opportunity to do as well. The brand is built up in a way, right? It's kind of like a relay race. Truett Cathy, Jimmy Collins, some of these people that you read about in the Chick-fil-A books, like, they started the relay race in the 50s, of the 60s, the 70s, and they ran that race well. And it's our job. I kind of view us as like, hey, we're like a third leg of the relay race. There's gonna be somebody after us, right? But we need to take that and run our butts off with that. So I didn't necessarily have to build the brand in Orange. I actually got to follow an operator, Eric Cienko, who actually, I have nothing but fantastic things to say. He did a fantastic job and built the brand there and grew the restaurant pretty substantially. And it was my job to take that baton from him and carry the legacy that not only Truett Cathy started at the Greenbrier Mall, but what Eric started in 2020. So it has been nothing but awesome. And I think going back to originally, how has Orange been treating me? I've been through some pretty significant family chaos in the last few months. And so to see how the business and my employees have been able to take care of me and love on me just really affirms hey, the Lord has me in the right place. And I am just immensely blessed to be at that restaurant, because I could be a number of other places, but to be in Orange has been fantastic for me and my family.
Awesome. That's very good. So a lot of us may not get a chance to get that ideal situation, but you were fortunate enough to be able to kind of check all those boxes, come back home, get into a freestanding situation already established. So I think that was a pretty cool piece of your journey coming out of LDP. And so I want to kind of pivot our conversation towards the LDP. And for those of you who don't know what LDP is, it's the Leadership Development Program. And I've been recently told this is not a operator pipeline. This is a program to help you become a better leader. So Kyle, you can speak on that as much as you want to or not. But I want to ask the first question about LDP. What was the most valuable piece, the most valuable part of LDP that you can recall?
I had a wonderful opportunity the last 6 months of my time in the program. So I spent one thing. This is feedback from me and everybody else who has been in LDP. We talk in months, and I realize every other career talks in years. So I spent about 3.5 years in LDP. My last 6 months of that time, I actually spent in Atlanta working as a supply chain consultant. Basically being the mouthpiece of supply chain to operators and like vice versa. So for me, I had never had a corporate job. I'd spent my entire time since graduating from the University of Texas working in either retail or at Chick-fil-A. So I'd never had an office job. I was suit and tie, going to work every day, helping out operators. And it affirmed for me several things. One, I never want to work a corporate job. That's just not something I want to do. I loved it. I learned so much from it, and it was awesome. Two, there was no business or family that I want to go in a business partnership with than Chick-fil-A and the Cathy family. Oh my goodness. It affirmed for me, though I maybe not didn't want to spend the rest of my life working in Atlanta, it just affirmed for me, man, I want to be around this company. I want to be in a company that cares this much, in a family that wants to see my family succeed. And then I think third and most important, I think what's going to be most valuable for the people on this call is a lot of times when you're in LDP, I call it my my CFA MBA, right? My Chick-fil-A MBA. And the great thing about it is you get put in all these different environments, whether it be a drive-through only location, an inline location in New York City, some very rural location in the middle of Kansas, and everything in between. You get put in all these locations, so you pack about 7 to 8 years of Chick-fil-A experience into 3. The one challenge with that is a lot of times you're by yourself running a restaurant in the middle of Dayton, Ohio, or in Vacaville, California. So your feedback loop from your employees is great because you get to manage them and hone your own skills every day. But as far as from either peers or from the corporate side of things, you don't get a ton of feedback quickly. When I worked in corporate, every single day, the feedback loop was almost instantaneous. Hey, we do a presentation. Hey, Kyle, I really love the way that you worded that. That's great. Hey, change the wording on the slide deck. Change this. Or I'm getting to go into meetings with high-end Chick-fil-A leaders and getting just to see, oh, this is how Alex communicated on this presentation. Hey, this is how Ashley was able to convey and win over this point. And for me, like I was great at getting results, not the best at communicating those results. And that's one of the things I struggle with throughout my process. To be able to have the opportunity to go to Atlanta and be a part of a feedback loop that was so quick helped me develop a lot. And so I think that was a unique thing that I got to do. And thankfully, I think within LDP, they're making that more of an opportunity for people to work. You're still under the umbrella of LDP, but you're working in different business silos of Chick-fil-A. And I think that was the most beneficial for me throughout my time in LDP.
And I know this question might be a little off book, but can you elaborate more of like this, like specifics of the jobs that you worked, or at least your rotation when you was at the home office? I know that you said you would never want to do it, but I think we got some people who are on the line that are younger, maybe and they might be trying to figure out, well, is restaurant ownership the way to go, or what other opportunities exist beyond that? So can you speak to kind of maybe what some of that corporate rotation look like?
Yeah, of course. And again, like I want to reiterate, like, and further questions will probably expose this and show you this, but my strengths and my skills and my passions align with being an entrepreneur, being an operator, being inside the restaurant with the hustle and the bustle. But man, like if there's a megaphone that I can yell into to talk about, like if you're going to work for a company and a big corporation, like Chick-fil-A is the place to do it. It was awesome from not only a culture of fun, not only a culture of better together, like they live out day to day all these principles that you hear in the books, in the Wall Street Journal articles. Like they legitimately do that. So what did I specifically do? So I was a supply chain consultant. So basically, there's about 15 of them, and they support different regions. So every supply chain consultant worked like on a specific region. So I'll just use Texas as an example because a lot of us here are from Texas. So I supported a guy, and I supported everyone on the team, but I supported a guy, and he supported Texas. So one of the crazy things about in any fast food company, not just Chick-fil-A, but McDonald's, Subway, anybody, they partner with distribution centers. So a big one in Texas is McLean. You might have MBM. There's many others, Martin Brower, throughout the country that we partner with. So Houston, we use McLean, right? So we partner with McLean Distribution. How are they setting their drivers up for success? How are we serving operator needs, right? And to that also, McLean gets product from where, right? How are we auditing Tyson's Chicken to make sure they're ensuring that we are being the world's most caring company by giving safe, great food? These produce companies that we get our produce from, how are we helping them sustain and maintain great delivery mechanisms? And so what I did primarily is a lot of these people on his team had fantastic experience from all across the country in consulting. One person worked from Target, one person was a restaurateur himself, and everywhere in between. And I kind of got to say, hey, I've worked in restaurants. I've managed 17-year-olds who are ultimately going to execute on these principles that we're sitting in a room here. How can we make this easier for restaurants and ultimately operators to be able to execute on? So I was kind of the mouthpiece for like the day-to-day operations for this team and help them to take this high-level things that they were coming up with that were ultimately going to help the operator and how a team member could actually understand them.
Awesome. And I think a lot of times what's lost or what people might look at from the outside looking in, the support center is full of people who have an idea of, one, they come from other industry, right? Where they bring that expertise in, but they also are very careful. And I've seen Chick-fil-A do this over the last maybe 20 years. They've gotten really good at making sure they hear from the restaurant and getting realistic feedback about. And so you just kind of gave us a peek into how they go about doing that, you know, so I appreciate that. We got a couple of questions in the chat. Giovanna, if you would unmute and go ahead and ask your question directly to Kyle, if you don't mind.
So I put in the chat, Kyle, and I'll kind of expound on this a little bit. You said you struggled with communication and got a lot of feedback around it. What were your key takeaways from that feedback? I think that's something something I've seen with people who want to apply for LVP or apply to be an operator. They struggle with communicating their why, communicating their story, communicating their results. And I think that's a key thing that you have to be able to do in order to get into the program or even get into the operator pool. And so what was some of that feedback that you got, and like, what were your key takeaways?
Yeah, so I'm going to back out a little further and kind of explain just a little background on Kyle, and that's going to help you understand like why I got this head feedback and then like what I did to like address it. And please like be my guardrails here if I'm like kind of go off on a tangent. But so I came from a football background. So I was a long snapper. Not a lot of people know what that is. So if anybody is a football fan on this call, the punter and the kicker stand really far behind the offensive line. I was the guy that snapped that ball. That's all I did. Played like 8 plays a game. No one cares how you do it. They just care if you do it. Yes, I've been on SportsCenter, not top 10 twice. We're not going to get into this on that call. But ultimately, they don't care if I pat my head and rub my belly at one time. They don't care if I like crisscross applesauce. As long as the punter or the holder gets the ball in their hands, that's all that matters. Great. Point blank. I took a lot of that mentality into the restaurant when I initially started. So, hey, our speed of service in the drive-thru needs to go to X to Y. Great. We got to add an order taker. We got to do this. I'm going to get outside and say, hey, thank you for choosing Chick-fil-A. How can I get a name for that order? Can I start? On goes the list, right? Hey, we need to lower food costs. Boom. I'm going to be the one to do it. So my operator, if you talk to him, you know, I think he's a fantastic guy, and I'm so grateful for him. Ken Massey in Austin, Texas, is a multi-unit guy there. He would classify me lovingly as a bull in a china cabinet. I was the guy that was going to go out and get the results, but communicate them. My results could communicate like for themselves. That's what I always thought, right? Like, hey, when I was in football, the results communicated for themselves. Like, hey, if the ball is right here, great. If the ball is, you know, through the back of the end zone, fire me. Great. And I remember, and again, this leadership consultancy and podcast is called The Pivotal Experience. So I'll tell you a pivotal experience I had in part of the communication piece. I went into my first interview with LDP. I applied. I had just gotten married. I'm like, man, I'm going to go be an operator. Like, that's what I'm going to do. I went in. I had the number 5 drive-through in the country at the time. We had an IPO of less than 1. I mean, our food cost was like 0 every single month. Like, I was doing all the things, and I could not talk my way out of a wet paper bag. And I remember getting a no. I don't even think they told me, like, hey, we're going to call you back in 2 weeks. They called me back like that afternoon, and they were like, hey, like, you're not lying to us, but we just have no idea, like, how you're doing any of this. And so we don't even know if you're leading on any of those people. And for me, that was such a pivotal experience, and having to take a step back and say, hey, like, this is great and all that we have all these trophies on the wall, but if I can't explain to an interviewer in an hour setting like we're in right now how I did those things, how am I supposed to actually lead a team of individuals to work for me? And I remember just like that setting in and being like, man, like, I've got to like really dive deep back into this. So I'm gonna like pull myself back into the question itself. So like some of that information I provided you. So I'm a big believer in the DISC profile. I'm a high D, like very much so. I'm very direct. Not everybody in Chick-fil-A or a corporate setting is a high D at all. I had to learn that. Everyone in football is a high D. No one is, right? Enneagram, I don't know if we have any fans out there. 3-wing 2, right? Kind of the same thing as a DISC profile, very direct. I want to get things done. I'm an achiever, right? A lot of people in football are that way, so I didn't have to like stretch and grow myself. Not a lot of people in the real world are that. So for me, I had to really learn a couple things. One, like what other communication styles were there. So one, just like being able to sit in the room and learn like, how does Ashley perceive what I'm saying? How does Alex perceive what I'm saying? How does Pierre understand like how I'm communicating with him, right? And then I think for me moving forward, it's formulating my stories, being able to articulate that for a broader spectrum of people to actually be able to understand. So did I leave anything out there? I want to make sure I answered the question fully that you asked, Yvonne.
No, I think that's really good. And I think like some key takeaways that I had from what you just said is understanding yourself better so that you can then communicate really well. Kyle, I'm a little bit of the same. Like, I'm a high D. Like, I'm a bull in a china closet. And when I want someone to communicate to me, I want them to be direct. Like, don't bring me a sugar cookie with icing on it. I want you to say, that was terrible, get better. That spurs me to go and do better. But not everybody receives that kind of feedback really well. And so I think you have to understand yourself. So the DISC assessment, the Enneagram, like those assessments are key. And I'm going to kind of throw this back at you, but like, you know, anybody on the call who wants to be an operator or wants to go into LDP, the first thing that I feel like that you need to do in order to make that happen is understand who you are so that you can be that influence piece. And so like my second question to kind of go along with that, what spurred you to take those assessments so that you could understand yourself better, so that you could like push past, I would say, communication, but also just all the things that go into leading people really well?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, my operator was probably going to fire me if I didn't get better. If I'm just being real honest, being real transparent, like and again, like my operator is similar to a lot of operators out there, been around the game for 20 years, was multi-unit. He had a great organization, and he was like graciously letting me be a leader in his organization. I didn't have to be there, right? Like it wasn't like he needed me to, no. Like, let's get this straight. It was a blessing that I got to be here. And so like his restaurant was going to do, 4,000 transactions a day with or without me. I might be able to improve it a little bit. So for him and for me to say, understand like, hey, we're all born with like natural skills, but that's only going to get us so far. And so like, if I'm going to get where I want to go, I'm a big believer in like mapping out like what you want your 30s, 40s, 50s to look like. 60s, 70s. I mean, I don't know how old everybody's on this call, but at the time that I was kind of in this reflection mode, I was 24, 25. And for me and my wife, we had just gotten married, and we sat down a ton and just said like, hey, what do we want? And I think that kind of goes to our question of like, both personally and professionally, like, what do I want? who am I? What do I care about? You know, that's going to guide you if you want to be an operator, you want to work on staff, you want to work in nonprofits, right? Like, what kind of operator are you going to be? What kind of leader are you going to be? What kind of husband, wife, what kind of spouse are you going to be? All these questions, right? So I think not only does asking these questions are going to help you in an interview setting if you're pursuing LDP, operator, these things, but I think it's going to make your marriage better. I think it's going to make your relationships at home better, right? Your relationships with your friends and just like your overall life experience. So for us, we really got very clear with what we wanted our 30s, 40s, and 50s to look like. And then I said, okay, like, this is what we want it to look like. Currently, I'm here. I want to get here, but I got to span this bridge right here. And then to do that, you know, we decided that pursuing LDP was the best thing for us. Well, to get an LDP, I got this instant feedback of like, hey, we have no idea how you communicate or how are you actually getting these results because you're not communicating well with us. First things first, it's like, okay, I got to understand that. So going to operators, going to like the leaders that I led, having to ask questions of, hey, Alex, like, what am I really bad at? And then being able to be mature enough and sit back and just whatever they say and know that you've asked a question. The purpose of this is for you to get better. So if Alex delivers some hard truth to you, then you got to be okay with it. You got to work on it, right? Alex may say like, hey, you just don't articulate well, so just talk slower because you talk fast, right? And he may just give you a few things to clean up. Hey, maybe attend a Toastmasters class and you just clean up some of that communication. But he might also tell you like, hey, you're an arrogant every time you lead. And to be honest with you, no one really wants to listen to you. And there's a times when I got that feedback and I said, okay. And then you yourself have to do the work and say, okay, deep down, like, I know I'm not trying to be arrogant, but perception is reality. And a lot of times how I showed up and how I communicated, I hadn't done the work to show up well, how I was internally meaning to. And that ultimately caused me to show up in a way that I didn't want to. So then it's kind of going back into the drawing board and like how I'm showing up. And there's a lot of podcasts and books and a lot of just conversations like this with friends and be, hey, be real with me, be raw with me, and help me understand, because I want to get back to, I'm here, I want to get there, I want to get here, but it's going to take some hard and tough conversations.
I think too with that, like, just understanding that, like, with assessments and with, you know, finding out who you are, that doesn't mean that's who you have to be. That's your natural tendency, right? And so I think people use those, they'll say, well, I'm just, you know, for me on the Enneagram, I'm an 8, like, and that can be pretty bad if I'm in my bad state. And so taking those things and saying, okay, I'm just better understanding who, like, God created me as, but he actually created me to be like him. And so what does that mean for me? I think that's a key thing of, like, you know, just understanding who you are and who people perceive you to be, and then being able to take that feedback. I think that is a tool that people underutilize, is just going to the people you lead and saying, hey, like, how did I show up today? Like, can you give me some feedback on how I could have shown up better? Because I don't think that we always show up at our best selves. I mean, we're human, right? You're an operator, you're human. I'm sure there's been good days and bad days, but like, being able to say, hey, I'm gonna ask for feedback, but then taking that feedback and actually putting into action some work to get some better results. So that's fire right there, by the way. Roderick posted a fire emoji. So killer.
I was hoping we're going to have like just a button like on this.
Wait, we're getting better. So no, I thank you for bringing up the need to get feedback. And as a leader, particularly if you're higher up in the restaurant, I think you have to create an environment that is conducive for people to want to tell you the truth and not just tell you the things that you want to hear. And so I really do think that's the key to it. A lot of times, you know, all of us, Giovanna, me, Ashley, Neff, and other people here, you know, if you're rolling in a GM or director of operations type of role, people are going to be reluctant to tell you the truth because if they're fearful of where their status is going to be with you after they tell you the truth. So if you're listening to this, Kyle hit the nail on the head, Giovanna hit the nail on the head, but you got to make sure also that the environment is conducive to them telling you the truth. Now, I want to say that we've got a lot of questions in the chat. And Ashley, I want you to do me a favor. At the 45-minute mark, will you facilitate kind of those questions when we get there, so we can kind of keep moving forward. But awesome dialogue, great questions so far. I want to let you guys know we're not going to miss those. We're going to get those toward the end if we have more time to. What is something, Kyle, that you've been proud that you've been able to accomplish in your restaurant so far? You say you've been running it for 7 months. What is something that's jumped off the page for you as an operator that you've been able to accomplish?
So we've been able to promote 7 leaders while I've been there. Huge. 7 months, 7 leaders has been fantastic. But I think the thing that I'm more proud about was every single leader that started with me. I transitioned October 1st of this past year. Every leader is still with me except for one, and he got a job that was a significant raise for him in an industry that he'd been working for a long time to pursue, and we helped him get his resume ready to go to. So I have been able to retain all my leaders, with the exception of that one, and he's doing something that he's passionate about. So I think we can point to food safety and profit and all these kind of things. But I think for me, it's like, hey, we income and influence, right? Like, what's the influence piece like, and being able to like create those environments where people like, hey, want to stay and work for me. There's 4 or 5 Chick-fil-A's within driving distance around my location. People could easily go work for any of those, but to be able to create those environments for those people is something I've been super proud of. And hey, the work still continues, so I got to show up tomorrow and continue to facilitate those environments. But we're very proud of that at Orange.
What would you say is the catalyst for creating that type of environment? I think you spoke to something that a lot of people probably are going to endure if they're going to go through LDP or in transition and taking over an existing operation. What do you think is the core elements that you employ to help keep those leaders? I don't know if that's a loaded question or not, but
no, absolutely. Because you can't just pay people more money. There's a certain point where like, hey, if the job is bad, like if you're just an absolute jerk, they're not going to show up, even if you pay them $1 million, right? Like to a certain extent, right? I'm very grateful for LDP. Again, here's me like sounding the bullhorn and being thankful that I had the opportunity to do LDP. For those of you familiar with the leadership development program, the interim manager side, I ran 9 different restaurants during that time. So I got to practice, and like basically what it is you show up randomly to a restaurant, your name shows up on a schedule, you fly out and you show up and you just have to lead a team of an existing Chick-fil-A. So I get 9 reps of that basically. And one of the things I learned during that time that I applied to my restaurant is like just radical transparency. Like, hey, here's what I'm trying to do as an operator in my restaurant. I wish I was in my restaurant, but we'd probably be very distracted if we were in my restaurant right now, right? And again, thank you all for all being here on Sunday, by the way. But in our restaurant, we have a newspaper article behind me, and it's this big, and it's written in 2027, and it states like what we're known for at our restaurant in Orange. Right. So some of the things like being Orange best stepping stone, right? It says like, hey, we're going to do this much in sales in 2026, right? Hey, we're going to do this much in profit. Hey, this is what we're going to give, right? We're going to take this many trips to Atlanta per year. Like, hey, I have a really good friend, Jeremy Sedevant, is an operator in Atlanta. Hey, we're going to partner with him and do these wind-shaped missions together, right? And it just says like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And this is a roadmap. And there's a fantastic book I got this from. It's called The Vivid Vision. It's like 100-page read off of Amazon. But for me, that radical transparency, like, hey, when you come and meet with me in my office, like there's a whole article. Like, this is where we're headed. This is our North Star. So for me, this is where I'm trying to head, right? And then I think this has happened recently in my restaurant. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the concept of a flywheel in life, right? So a flywheel is I think that the Webster Dictionary is a machine that stores energy, and like the faster you get it moving, the faster it's going to stay moving, right? So basically you ask yourself the question like, what are the things that me as an operator that only I can do that will allow like my restaurant to grow? And I've been radically transparent about like what my strengths of an operator is. Like, you don't want me doing interviews like first round interviews. I'm not the most organized. I'm not the most detail oriented when it comes to taking notes, right? Like, I'm an operations guy, like I'm an encourager, but there's certain things. So for me and my team, I've been radically transparent with them on like what I'm good at, what I can help them with, right? And then on that, giving them the free reign to be able to go and like, hey, like I put you in charge of the drive-thru. I trust you, right? Unless unless there's something major that just happens, like within a certain like bandwidth, like that's all your domain, and I'm just going to trust you, right? So for me, it's like just a ton of radical transparency up front of what I'm trying to do and who I am, staying to that, and then just like trusting my team members in them, and I'm not micromanaging, I'm trusting them. And I think that in itself is a small flywheel, because I'm radically transparent with them. I put a ton of trust in them. That creates more trust in me as a leader, and then we can ultimately build upon that.
Oh, I love that. No, great answer to that question. We've got 4 minutes until we head into our general Q&A from the questions that are already in the chat. I can see that we got a few of those there. So I'm going to give you one more question before we get into that. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone who is wanting to pursue becoming an operator via LDP?
Yeah. The work counts the first day you show up in Atlanta. I learned this in college, right? So I am not a stellar athlete, but I had the wonderful opportunity of being able to walk on to the University of Texas as a preferred walk-on. So I got to come on with all the scholarship guys. I remember I graduated high school, and then the next day I went to college, like point blank. And then like 2 days later, we were working out. And I remember like everybody in the entirety of like our freshman class was the best in Dallas, was the best in Houston, was the best in their hometown, right? And then it's like, hey, that's great and all, but we're going to do this workout and find out who the best is. And that's like kind of something with LDP. Now, in LDP, everybody has an opportunity. Everybody can get a restaurant or a job, whatever your goal is. You're not necessarily fighting for each other for a starting position, but for a certain extent, you are like the work starts and counts then. I think a lot of times this is very evident in Chick-fil-A around 2016, 2019. And I'm really glad you said it. LDP is not an operator development program. It is a development program, and most of the people within the program want to become operators and staff. I have some great friends on staff. So a lot of times people are like, hey, it's one and the same, right? But like, well, you're not guaranteed anything, right? And I think a lot of times when people get into LDP, they think, hey, mama, I made it. Like, I just got to bide my time, put in my application, and I'm going to get me one of these big freestanders with a line that's backed up on the feeder road. And that's not the case. The only thing they owe to you is your paycheck from the previous 2 weeks that you worked. And so I would just say like, hey, like once you get in, like that work ethic that you had when you were a team member and you first got that passion to wanting to own your own business and pursue, like I call it, like when I got told no from LDP, I would have licked the thaw cabinet clean. Just a chance to get it redo on me interview, like, right? Just like as an Uno reverse card for me, right? And so I kind of constantly reminded myself, like, hey, like you gotta like keep that passion. Now, one of the things I had to learn was like, hey, don't be a D all the time. Like you can keep the passion with you inside of you, but also not be a jerk. Like again, feedback for Kyle there.
And just to specify, he's referring to the D from the DIS assessment, just to make sure that we're all clear. To make sure we're all on the same page.
That thing, what I just said is applied, but it's probably like a good statement to anything. So, because I've definitely been guilty of all of those before. So, and I think, a little side note, and this is like some inside baseball, and I'm an operator, so I can share this. Network your butt off your first 12 months. And here's why. One, Chick-fil-A is filled with amazingly smart, educated, driven professionals, especially on the corporate side. A lot of times we idolize and put operators on a pedestal. I can't hold a candle to a lot of people in Atlanta. They are so smart. So one, like, just go learn from them, right? Like I would encourage everybody to have mentors in your community that are operators, that are different business owners, just to learn. I think that's a great principle in life. But like if you had the opportunity to get an LDP, like find a mentor that does not work in LDP, just somebody you can connect with. And here's a big reason for that. Once you're in LDP, you get your application for operator or staff at the 12-month mark. So at the 12-month mark, you instantly want something. You're wanting to get that restaurant in your hometown. You're wanting to get a job in that department. that you're seeking out, right? Before the 12-month mark, you're just a young, hungry, like underclassman that just wants to learn from you, right? So I think a lot of mistake people make is they network too late. I never think it's too late to network, but if you just spend a lot of time in the front half developing people, you never know who's going to be in the interview room or going to be able to what favor you're going to be able to call in 2 years down the line.
Yeah, no, excellent. No, I love that advice. So now we're going to pivot into the Q&A session of this conversation. Ashley, I know there's a few questions that have been asked by a few people who are attending. If you would you facilitate picking the questions for us so we can get them answered by Kyle?
Yes. I guess I'll go, with one, just to make sure. What part of the LDP process was most valuable for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's back to that staff rotation, right? I think initially, right? So, like, for those of you, a brief explanation of LDP. For those of you who don't know, there's two sides. An interim manager, which you're running pre-existing restaurants for operators who passed away, who's retired, who are no longer with Chick-fil-A, basically acting as a general manager or an operator, interim operator of sense, getting those reps. The second side of LDP is GOS, which is grand opening supervisor. So you're coming along somebody who has been selected as an operator and helping them open up their franchise location. So you're helping them hire, train staff, everything in between, and really influencing them and helping them make the best decisions in order to be able to open up a successful, profitable, impactful Chick-fil-A franchise, right? So that's the two portions. And then every now and then, and they're making this become more of a thing, but you get to do what I call staff rotation, meaning I got to go work on staff. And for me, by far and away, it was that staff rotation piece. Now, I needed the baseline of getting a few months at either of those two departments of IM and GOS. But again, like I explained earlier, just the feedback loops, the relationships that I was able to build. And for me, like, I was very comfortable in the restaurant up until that time I had a staff rotation. I had spent 6.5 years in the restaurant. I could blindfoldedly run that thing. Now, there's a little my humility there, right? But there's always something we can learn. But for me, it was a total 180 and putting myself in somewhere where I was not comfortable. And I think that fostered a ton of growth in myself during that time in LDP.
Love that. And then I guess the next one is, how did you make the decision to go through LDP versus applying directly? And if LDP didn't exist, how would you pursue to be an operator? Will be different.
Okay, so I'm going to make the assumption that I'm doing that in 2024, right? Because I can't go back to, Truett Sunday School class in like the 80s at Robert Hinkle. But
Yeah.
but again, the Chick-fil-A reality of now, when Robert, and again, for those of you on the call, Alex and several other the leaders here, their operator is at what they call a handshake agreement, meaning that he personally knew Truett in 19. He said, "Hey, you want to go run this mall in like Wichita Falls? I think that's Wichita or wherever he was at, right?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Sure." And the opportunity wasn't what you see it today, right? So people like Robert have really built the brand. But for me, I'm going to make the assumption that we're talking in 2024 terms, right? Because we can't go back in the past. So again, the first part of the question was why LDP? For me, I was 24, turning 25, and just got married. I looked at my resume and I looked at my bank account and I said, I don't have the financial stability currently. I haven't built enough resources to be attracted to Chick-fil-A. Not that that's a huge thing, but it is big, right? You do need to be in a good spot to be able to open up your business. And then two, like I haven't run a ton of businesses. I don't have 15 or 20 years of business experience. What is a way for me to get a ton of business experience in a short amount of time? And going back to my what I jokingly call the Chick-fil-A MBA, for me, it's like, hey, if I want to partner with this brand of Chick-fil-A, going to my Chick-fil-A MBA is the best way to do that. And then if LDP did not exist, other than maybe cry and go home, because I think it is the best way for somebody that's my age. Again, at the time, I was 25. I just got married. I didn't have any kids. The answer might be different if I had been a pastor for 20 years or had a lot of other business experience. So I don't know, Pierre, where you're sitting with that. But so for me in my situation, man, I think two things. There's two routes. One, I think you find an absolutely fantastic operator that has a need for you on their leadership team. I think there's a ton of operators out there. You need to be able to fit into their leadership team to create impactful results and have actual influence. Not just be a manager of the drive-through, but actually not just run some back house stuff, but actually be able to influence the restaurant itself. Because in these interviews you go into, that's the question. Is not, hey, what did your restaurant do? It's what did you do to influence your restaurant? And so I would go somewhere where I had an actual opportunity to influence the team. And maybe just, just as a Hail Mary here, like if there's another restaurant startup, that's the only thing I can think of that's like harder than running a Chick-fil-A is going in and running an actual other like restaurant startup. And I'm a big fan of fine dining and hospitality, going and working one of these full scale restaurants and you're going to get a lot of the same leadership experience, right? I think working for Chick-fil-A is good, but this is like my Hail Mary to this answer if LDP didn't exist. So like, hey, go work in the pit, like go work in the dish pit. You know, some of these, I'm a big fan of Will Gard and Anthony Bourdain and some of these guys and these restaurateurs, like go actually work in these full scale restaurants if you're truly passionate about being in the restaurant industry. So that's like advice that I would give.
Love that. And I guess last question before we wrap up. What advice would you give to a 16-year-old in the restaurant?
What is a 16-year-old trying to do? Is a 16-year-old on this call? Or
I guess they're in the middle. Like they're unsure of what to do.
Yeah, I think just ask a lot of questions. What do you want to do? And I think spend the next couple of years before you pursue higher education and or internships. And again, like I said, I want to emphasis like, hey, don't necessarily jump off and go to college unless you know what you actually want to do. Ask a lot of questions. I would encourage a 16-year-old, one, have a conversation with the operator and your leaders at that restaurant. But hey, like there's somebody in your church that's like, that owns a small business that's like drives a new truck. Like go find that person. Like there's somebody that has a nice car in your hometown. Every leader, like I'm love being on this call right now. Like there's a lot of entrepreneurs, baby boomers that live in every town across America that would be more than happy to talk to a 16-year-old. Like, hey, so-and-so, how'd you make your money? Or how did you lead this team of people? Or how did you work for this company? Or how did you, people always want to talk about themselves. Like go find that person and like talk to them and just like interview as many people you can in your sphere of just life, wherever you live. And I think that's going to lead you somewhere great. Right. And then also, hey, go travel, go experience something a little bit different. You're not 18 yet, so you might have to go with your parents or wait a few years. But I think, it's okay to work 5 different jobs in your 20s. It just because it's going to make the difference when you're, again, 30, 40, 50 to actually find out what you're truly passionate about and what you're going to be a world changer at. So don't feel like you have to have it all figured out at 18. Because a lot of times you get to your senior year of high school and somebody sticks that microphone in your face. And if you don't say, I'm going to go to Texas and major in finance, or I'm going to go to A&M and major in engineering, or like wherever, or I'm going to go be an engineer at the chemical plants. If you don't say that, the answer is wrong. And I want to be the first person in the room to say you like, hey, it is okay to not have it all figured out. Work hard, ask a lot of questions, but you don't have to have it all figured out. And just keep pursuing whatever your God-given talents are.
Love that. Great advice.
I think too, Kyle, just kind of, you said this a little bit earlier. So just kind of point this out again is like, and I think you just said it, but a little bit differently is like, find a mentor. Like, I think if I could give some advice, I'm about to be 40 in like 2 months, but if I could give some advice, I know, right? Old lady. But if I could give some advice to my 16-year-old self, I think it would be those two things you said. Find a good mentor and somebody older, wiser, somebody who's lived more life than you. Find a mentor. And I think the second thing, travel the world. Like there's so much out there to experience. And I think sometimes we get, I think Chick-fil-A can do this. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time. It can like, just kind of box you in of like, okay, I just
bubble,
here. But experience the world and find some good mentors. And if your God-given ability is to lead people, I think this is the business for you. Like that's what Truett Kathy set out Chick-fil-A to, you know, we're in the people business selling chicken. That's what we do, right? But I think there's sometimes these people who say, I want to be an operator, I want to go into LDP, and those aren't their God-given abilities, and they struggle with that. I actually had somebody in our restaurant that like wanted to go into LDP, and I was like, that ultimately took us 2 years, but it's like your God-given ability is something else, and that doesn't make you less than. Like that does not mean that you're not a successful individual. And so like we had to work through that. Like that was the thing of like, hey, I want to be an operator because that's what success looks like. No, success looks like you using your strengths and your God-given talents to make a difference. Like that's what success looks like.
And I want to reiterate this. I think this is huge. A lot of times, especially, I'm going to make the assumption that most everybody here on this call works for Chick-fil-A. But apply this same knowledge, if you don't, to whatever restaurant or industry you work in. A lot of times, people, cream rises the crop, right? You go work Chick-fil-A, you like it because it's friendly, or they have a good schedule, or the pay is good. And so you work hard, you become a trainer, right? And then you're a good trainer because you're driven or whatever. And then you become a manager. And then you graduate high school and you start college. And you like work hard and you develop a relationship with your operator, you're providing more value, and then you become a director, right? And you keep working. And I see this cycle so often where you keep moving up the ladder. And the answer is like, hey, what do you want to do? It's like, hey, I want to be the GM. Or, hey, I want to be the director of this. And then once you get to like the director or the GM level, somebody asks you, hey, what do you want to do? And you say, hey, I guess I want to do LDP and be an operator because that's like the next thing, right? That's not always the answer. I've been literally guilty of this. I don't know. I think I maybe asked Alice this one time. I know I asked Rod this. But I've been in restaurants where like mistakenly, I just like ask people like, hey, what do you want to do? And it's like me as an operator asking, and they just say, oh, I want to be an operator. Like, is that actually what you want to do? Right? Like that does not have to be the answer. You might want to be a musician. You might want to be a world changer in some different facet that I don't even know about. I would love to hear about it. Right? But don't limit yourself to just the restaurant. The restaurant's awesome. I want to do this for the next 40 years. But I think the answer isn't always be operator, isn't always LDP. It's a great answer. But like we're saying, like I think you just don't catch yourself up in that silo of just like the next thing on the ladder is the answer that I'm going to give. Actually answer what you're passionate, what you feel like your calling is for. And if you don't know your calling, find a mentor. It's okay to say, hey, I don't know. It's okay to take some time, right? Especially if we're in our 20s, we're in our 30s. I think there's plenty of life for us to live to be able to find those answers.
No, I appreciate all the words of wisdom you have shared so far, Kyle. Thank you for Giovanna, Ashley, everyone else, Pierre, Kyron, all the people who had an opportunity to participate in this conversation. Kyle, did you have any parting words before we close out?
Yeah, I got some. This is some football words, but I always had a coach that would say, "Stay low and keep your feet driving." And I always think that's funny. And not a lot of people understand that outside of a football context. What that means is, hey, like in football, the low man wins, meaning like if I'm low, if my center of gravity is low, I'm going to be able to drive with my legs and push. And then, hey, the person who stops driving their feet is going to be the person that loses. So you got to keep moving forward. And for me, I actually got this interview question in my operator pursuit was, hey, when was the last time you had a freezer moment? And again, I'm in a suit and tie, and I think maybe the collar was choking me a little bit too much. I didn't understand what they were saying, but what they were implying was, when was the last time you had a freezer moment? Means, hey, when was the last time the freezer is like the soundproof and stormproof place in the restaurant? When was the last time you went in there and just like cussed at yourself, or had to like curse at God, or you had to just like emotionally break down, whatever that is for you, because you needed a second, because whatever was going on in your day was so frustrating, and it could be personal, it could be professional, but you just had to go and just like take some time for yourself in the freezer. And for me, it's like that stay low and keep your feet driving is so important, especially in our industry. Because there are going to be times when you get told no for LDP and you got to go back to the starting ground, right? Like you're not going to get the interview, right? You're not going to get promoted, and your operator is going to give you feedback and say, hey, you're a little bit arrogant and you need to be at work on communicate better, right? You're going to get told no for restaurant opportunities. Orange is the 4th restaurant I interviewed for. Blessed to be here, right? But that first interview I went into, I thought I was going to get it, right? Little did I know it was going to take another 4 interviews, right? There were some days when I hadn't seen my wife in 12 weeks because I was in Dayton, Ohio, right? And I was 1,000 miles away from home, and I really wanted to see her and spend time with her, but I had to stay low and keep my feet driving because my family had a dream. So, one piece of feedback: there's going to be times when the going's going to get tough, and you have to stay low and keep your feet driving.
Love that. Love that. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Kyle. If everyone here that's left on the line, could you put a 1 in the chat just as a nod of appreciation for Kyle spending some time with us today? This is our operator series. Our goal for bringing on Kyle and hopefully other operators. Maybe I'll lean on Kyle to help me facilitate some things. But having operators come in, share their stories, share the things that they've done well, share the opportunities, the challenges they have seen. Hopefully something has been said that will help you in your journey into becoming a better leader. Next month, we'll have another Lead Better. The event is already available for this on June 30th. We're going to be talking about systems and processes again. Giovanna and I will be hosting that Q&A style system and processes. And so you guys can go to tpenow.com and sign up for that right here, right now. Kyle, thank you so much for today. I will be connecting with you on multiple fronts for multiple things here pretty soon. So we'll chat some more. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in, and this will conclude this Lead Better. Again, go to tpenow.com and sign up for the next one. Also, this is also available in Spanish. And for those of you who see Neff on the line, we will have Spanish-driven Lead Betters. He led the first one earlier in the month, and I can't wait for him to do it again. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Tap into the Pivot Experience, where we help young, hungry entrepreneurs move on to the next step.